animating in this immersive environment. Well, I said, right now I have left the VR industry, and it is not of my choosing. Baobab had decided at the end of the year that they were going to stop doing in-house productions, and frankly, I do think we were a little ahead of the market. But I'm really happy that we got to, I got to participate in helping to pioneer, our mission, which was to create narrative VR, interactive narrative. So I'm at DNEG now. I'm back in feature film animation. DNEG, even though it's a visual effects company for many, many years now, has started a feature film animation division. So I'm working on just fully animated features again, which is nice. And it's interesting having a locked camera again. So that's a pleasure. But the VR challenges were great. So I had the pleasure of working on a bunch of different movies and got to really learn from some really great artists and on some really great shows that taught me so much about cinematography and use of lighting and timing and dialogue and editorial and just great. We had workshops, some really great actors that would come in, obviously because we were in California, so that was easy for them to come, and attended a lot of great workshops, and got to have puppeteering workshops and all these things that kind of really contributed to our art form. And so I feel really, really lucky. And I feel also really lucky to have gotten to carry it into, new technologies. But I came to it pretty late. I did not have my first salaried animation job until at DreamWorks, I turned 40. So you can kind of get the time frame from there. Prior to that, I was a theater nerd, and what I was really doing was spending my time trying to be a rock star. I lived in Chicago, and I was in the Chicago music scene, and we recorded albums and toured around. So it really gave me this insight into audience response, like immediate audience response on a stage. If you try something, you can find out if it works right away or you fall flat on your face. So I've always gotten to kind of carry that around in my arsenal. So it was really great, like I said, being able to bring these two, back up here. It was really great being able to bring these combined experiences to this emerging technology, which was narrative interactive VR. While I said in the introduction, I was able to, I first got a chance to try it out working on a Google Spotlight story, directed by Patrick Osbourne, and it was called Pearl. And when I put on the little Google cardboard, I put it away. When I put that on for the first time, and turned to my side and saw the father and daughter that I had animated sitting in the car next to me. If you've ever seen the short, it's really beautiful. I just started crying because I'd never seen that before. I'd never sat in the same room with characters that I got to bring to life. So I was done. I was just like, I'm working in VR. I need to find who else is doing this, and I just want to stay in this. I don't want to go back to regular movies anymore. So I found out about Baobab. In fact, a producer from Google that was on Pearl was tangentially working with. Oh,
you sorry. See me?
I think somebody needs.
Sorry, can go on.
Okay. Anyway, So anyway, the producer that had worked on Pearl was tangentially working with Baobab and hooked me up with it. So I had come, they had worked on Invasion, Asteroids, and Jack was not internal. Really, the two internal productions were Invasion and Asteroids. So the shows that I got to work on while I was there were Legend of Crow, Bonfire, and then most recently, Baba Yaga, which I think was only just released in January, if I'm remembering correctly. And there is a distinct difference maybe between the three that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to lean heavy into Baba Yaga because it's really dear to my heart. It's the one that I feel like my crew really knew what they were trying to do. And got to take all of the experimentation that we'd done up to that point and really try to just infuse a narrative with the most subtle yet consequential interaction that we could, while still being what I think you guys have been talking about a lot, I think, while still being as empathetic as we can, like trying to elicit emotional responses from the audience that makes them compelled to interact, not just because there's a button in front of their face. So that was Baba Yaga, but I'm going to go over what we tried on Crow and what we tried on Bonfire, because it was like the two extremes that came together into this latest production. So really quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time with watching videos, but I do want you to sort of watch the trailer we put out for this piece.
I refuse to go back until I find that witch blossom. Or you can carry the lantern and come with me.
Fresh meat from the village, headed straight to Baba's kitchen.
Who dares to enter my forest?
No. Keep her distracted. I'll get us out of here, I promise.
A thief, perhaps?
We've got to get out of here.
Here she comes!
Do you know the punishment for thievery?
We're just trying to help our mother.
Now, where were we?
You're going to eat us?
Heavens, of course not, child. I'm a vegetarian. My plants, on the other hand, are not.
So it was super fun. And, Baobab, to their credit, the principal partners could gather up the best voice talent, so over the course of, we got to work. I mean, Glenn Close on your movie was awesome, and so it just makes our job as animators that much easier. But, this wasn't just straight up animation. So there's a lot of things that we had to think of and plan, and a lot of goals that we had that are not typical of regular feature film movies. So to Baobab at the time, we realized that straight up storytelling in VR was a new medium that we were helping to pioneer with a couple other companies at that time. And so we knew that there was specific benchmarks that had to be reached. Like, one of the more obvious was that, you as the viewer are connected with this world. You're standing in the middle of it. You are immersed in it, as the word we all like to use. And so there had to be reasons for you to feel connected with it emotionally, as well as just physically being in the place. The other part of it, as far as storytelling, is that because you're immersed in this world, you can look anywhere you want. So you can imagine, for a director maybe coming from film, that's really freaky, to be like, you have something really important going on, and yet the viewer is just like, whoa, check out those mountains or something. Like, you want to find ways to keep people focused. And so the theater techniques and clever lighting techniques and stuff come into play, and audio and all that. So that was another kind of benchmark we knew we had to make, that you as the viewer are not just a passive, you're not just playing a passive role, that you are standing there and you are inspired to, compelled to, just motivated to act, to push that story forward, or to help out the character in some way, or help out the story. So you feel like you have a purpose there personally. And, one of the, super brass rings for us was that the characters themselves acknowledge you in real time, as if you make you believe you are there, and then they see you and are speaking to you. There's a lot of clever little tricks, you know, you can play. And we wanted to, our goal was always to like, how can we get past those just tricks and really make it, you know, really make it a moment to moment presence that you have. And our mantra at the time was making you matter. As you can see, all these sentences have the word you in it. Every single thing of the story was done so that the user felt like they mattered, and we would constantly be shooting for that bar. So one of the first things that in one of their first productions, Invasion, which was, you know, a super cute hit on VR and kind of still is to this day. I think it's like the single most downloaded app or whatever in the Oculus store. They discovered the power of eye contact. It's just immensely important. And animators, we always have the rule that you don't break the fourth wall. You know, that's just creepy. And if you watch an animated movie and suddenly a character looks at the camera, this is weird. So it was flipping that on its head and realizing, no, that's the most important thing at this point, is being able to believably look in the user's eye. And there's tech involved, obviously. You guys all know, you know, head tracking and all that stuff. But it also takes kind of the gentle hand of an experienced animator to make those eyes feel like they're thinking and perceiving you. Then there's that other challenge of directing the viewer's eye around the space. Invasion, or I'm sorry, Asteroids is a really great example. It's kind of theater in the round, and there's just stuff for you to look at everywhere. However, there's a story that's being told. So through the use of you know, carefully choreographed movement and, you know, theater tricks, you know, using ensemble clusters, graphic ensemble clusters and lighting and set, you know, the composition in combination with the set and lighting and all that, you lead the audience around. And that became something that I think they got really good at. The director, Eric Darnell, got really good at staging things that way. And the other, you know, pillar is that you have that role to play. You're inspired to act. In The Legend of Crow, that was, I think Asteroids being in their second production was when hand controllers just started becoming on the market. You know, I think Oculus, I actually don't remember who released them first. So by the time Crow was being released, it was like, oh, we've got these things now that a user can manipulate the world. But the technology wasn't far enough that they could go super far with it. But in an example like Crow, you became, you know, an entity that propelled the seasons forward, thus propelling the story forward. And you did other things as well, but they're all very subtle. When I start talking about some of the next things, Bonfire and things like that, you'll see how we thought we were trying to push the envelope a little bit with interactivity. So to us, to Baobab at the time, what did that mean? Well, like I said, as a person who now has hands, so to speak, and obviously you have a presence there, it's not a game. It needs to be something, you can gamify it, but it still needs to be something that moves the story forward. Your interactions need to be purposeful you need to feel like you have some sort of agency. You know, in this case, like since Crow was flying to the whatever, she who does everything by thinking, or I'm forgetting the name of the character. He's essentially coming to pick up fire to warm up the world. So you are the one that wields the fire and you give it to Crow, and you feel like you're part of the story. But it also kind of has to be easy and fun. And again, Crow is the first example that we're using hand controllers. And this became the most obvious way that people wanted to move their hands at the time. It was a new thing, you know, these hand controllers. So everybody would just always wave them around. So we had sequences like this where you're flying through space with Crow and you were directing these asteroids as an orchestra. You know, they were pitched and tuned that as you waved your hand and you activated them, and they would create these beautiful chordal structures. And I thought it was really well engineered and again, really fun to be inside. So it has to be intuitive, has to be fun. You know, to keep the story moving forward, you have to be, has to be as frictionless as possible. I'm sure it's something you guys discuss a lot. So this interaction part of it has a goal. And like I said, this was our brass ring. This was the, we really wanted to, and we're constantly trying to reach for building a meaningful relationship with the characters that you inhabit the space with. Our vision of that was extensive. Like we had really high standards for what that might be. But of course, you're limited by the technology that you have. And of course, we just had to take baby steps to get there. So one of the first productions that Baobab tackled to in this regard, in developing a relationship with the character regard, was Bonfire. This was the fourth production, in-house of Baobab, came right after Crow, and it couldn't have been more polar opposite. Where The Legend of Crow, or Crow the Legend, if anybody has seen it, is just a movie. You have a part in it, and they acknowledge you're there, but you're just standing in the middle of a movie, and it's really pretty, and the audio's mixed really great, and the real-time effects and the game engine are nice, and the characters are really well designed and animated, I think, but it's not like none of the characters change or evolve because of you. So we're like, okay, let's simplify the setting and the story, and let's just try to develop a character that that literally changes because you are interacting with it. And so there's only two characters in this thing, three, including yourself, because you actually have a character in Bonfire. You're a shipwrecked pilot, a shipwrecked space pilot. And you land on an alien planet, and you have to figure out kind of where you are, and you meet your helper robot who's crashed with you, and she's just annoyed with you because you screwed up and got them crashed. And then all of a sudden you encounter this little alien, and this alien tries to be threatening, but it's not. And you start to realize that you can actually start feeding it and kind of make it start to become slowly, even though in these shots it's very, very friendly with you already, it slowly becomes friendly with you, and you can screw it up, and it can back away, and you face challenges together, and it is an actual little relationship you have with Pork Bun, the little alien. So I'm going to discuss a little bit more of how we sort of tried to achieve that, but just quickly to introduce the culmination of that, which was Baba Yaga. This is what we adopted was the old Eastern European folk tale of the witch of the woods, who there's many different versions of her, and we kind of took it in this. It's really funny. She's like on this jungle island where these settlers have settled and begin to kind of destroy the landscape. And of course, she's in charge of nature and the forest, and so she fights back over the years. And then it is the story of little Magda, who is a 10-year-old girl, the daughter of the chieftain, who is lying in bed dying, and the little daughter says, "Mother, I'm going to basically avenge you," and goes and wants to rid the world of the island of Baba Yaga. And then of course it's not as simple as it may seem. The challenge is that you as a character are Magda's sibling, I guess I should say, not necessarily sister or brother, who is there at their mother's bed and feeling the same pain and making the decisions together to go into the woods, and she's constantly needing your help to kind of further her goals, and you both get captured, and you both so you're experiencing these things together and helping her. That was our goal, is to feel like you were an integral part of the story. You were also the daughter or son of the chieftain, and wanting this, kind of get to the same goal and fight the villain. So let's see. Okay, just really quick. I want to go back to that. I'm going to come back to that because I think it's a nicer finale. There's a nice promo video we did for Crow. So anyway, the process, if any of you are even vaguely familiar with animated movies, like me, you watched a bunch of DVD extras, and that's pretty much how I learned the process. And we had to kind of make a hybrid of what most of us knew about feature filmmaking, and then what a segment of the engineers knew about game creation, and try to build this together in this pipeline and this process that to us was uncharted. We didn't really know how to do it, and we're constantly readjusting our methods. But most of it is relatively simple. Like in any of these productions, in Crow, in Bonfire, in Baba Yaga, everything starts with a script. Our creative director, Eric Darnell at Baobab, I think he holds the record of having directed the most. No, I think collectively he has the highest grossing animated films. He's from DreamWorks Animation. He directed the entire Madagascar franchise, as well as all of the Penguins of Madagascar franchise. And then a couple, and originally Ants, one of their first CG production, that was his. So he comes from that traditional background. So scripts are, we get script and script rewrites and scripts and scripts and scripts. We're reading them and reading them at the beginning all the time, just like a regular movie, just to get the story. But I will come back to this, but at the same time that scripts are being written, a designer, an experienced designer, an engineer, usually in conjunction with the director, is coming up with what that experience is, flowcharting, like, how are we going to go through this story, and where could we possibly loop back around or have different options for things based on what the user chooses. And we came up with, Baobab did our own language for this and our own charting system and all these things that became, like, if you would have heard us talking during a normal day, you'd be like, what is it that they're referring to? Because we just kind of ended up with our own jargon. And it was really fun because throughout these pieces, all the same people kind of stayed. It was only it was between 20 and 30 people at any one time. Very, very small. And that's including executive staff and production. Like, it was a very, very small crew. So we just really had fun, like, coming up with things together. The other basic things are, of course, you go through character design just like in a regular movie. Somebody's got to design what the characters look like and get them ready for modeling and rigging and all that stuff, like a CG character is going to be done. We animated in Maya. These were all, done in Maya and ported to the game engine. Had to come up with little pork bun, went through a bunch of iterations on that for how to get the graphic appeal and the lovability out of this simple little shape. Also something that was low poly, but didn't really look low poly. Still had readable features. The robot had to be readable and understandable. You still go through the same phases of concept art where, we had production artists that would just come up with these beautiful illustrations, and that became the key art, for the set builders and the lighters and everybody to sort of shoot for. And it's tough because, as this is real-time rendering technology, so it's a little more limited than what we're used to in feature film. And the styles are different from show to show. You could see, like, the first one I showed you there was Crow, and it was more storybook and ethereal, and it had atmosphere and texture to things, where Bonfire, we shot for more of a 1960s graphic-y kind of feel and more direct kind of key lighting, where you were kind of blacking out areas you didn't want the audience to really focus on. And then Baba Yaga was sort of a combination of the two, where it started off as this really beautiful storybooky feel. And then we decided, well, it needs to be a lot more theatrical, like a thing. Oh, sorry. Well, hang on, let me go back. Like see if I can stop it on one of these, something like, Oh, there's the stop, sorry. Something like this, where you see like the flatness of, like almost like you could actually reach out and pick up a piece of cardboard. We wanted it to look like set pieces. And you were actually inside this little theater in the round that had, what did the director like to call it? Islands of reality. You know, when certain things were happening, and like scenes would kind of gradually add to them with lighting, and set pieces would actually start to appear. It was a really nice, and then we actually had like a puppet show introduction to the thing. And then the story, of course, also has to have a flow. This is interactive, but it's still a narrative. So maybe it's a sense of coming up with the golden path, you know, through the story. That is essentially it. Is what we started with. Like in Crow, it was just a mapped out story because there really wasn't a ton of deviation. When it came to something like Bonfire, it wasn't as linear. And so we really just boarded out the beats and then just kind of took it from there. But when we got to Baba Yaga, which is what I'm going to end up leaning into the most, we figured out like, okay, storyboard's great, but if there's going to be branches, if there's going to be consequences to your actions, we need to storyboard those consequences and branches. And we need to be able to move fast and be nimble and change things on the fly. So we came up with a first iteration of something I wish, you know, it's one of the regrets, like I wish we could keep going on this, was of what we were just calling VR storyboards, but something that we could do in engine, in Unity. We were working in Unity at the time, with just image sprites that are on the timeline, and just time them out and stage the entire production, like an entire sequence essentially, this way, so that a director could make changes and approve things before we hired the expensive crew of animators to come in and help us, you know, animate it. But as you can see, I've kind of tried to A/B it. It's a little dark, but you know, the timing of what the final animation and the scene as it was boarded is almost one-to-one. There were very few changes that all we really need to do is hand off the staging to the animators, which we could export back into a Maya scene. They would just make sure that the character hit their mark, and they created, you know, these wonderful, very heartfelt performances from our main character, Magda. So storyboards became a little different, and they would have continued to become a little different, even more so, because we could begin to program the interactivity as we went along. So much like video game pipelines, we also kept this portion of it called the vertical slice, which is I wasn't used to, but it was really nice to be able to do, which is we just took a small section of it and we produced it from bottom to top, so that we had like this final version. So something like Baba Yaga, which was very narrative with subtle interactions that you didn't really notice. We only kind of did like one kind of consequential interaction, but mostly it was just so that we could get the look and feel, and the rigs were working, and everything felt right. With something, you know, stepping back to Bonfire, the one before it, where we really were experimenting with one-to-one interaction constantly with the character, our vertical slice was the marshmallow feeding of the little alien. So the vertical slice itself just became figuring out how we could get this little game essentially set up between the user and Pork Bun, and how we could kind of show Pork Bun start from tentative to excitedly and go all the way to excitedly friendly and like licking your face and all that kind of stuff. So obviously, you know, we're creating locomotion cycles and things like that. And our job as the animators was like, oh, we want to make sure these things have that little bit more bounciness and cartooniness, and just kind of kept working with the engineers to be able to combine layered animations to pull in certain things. Like if it's moving at a certain velocity, it will overshoot and bounce at a certain speed, and then of course put all that stuff together in the engine and start making sure it's targeted, and that maybe when you throw something the character can look away, and depending on how early in your interaction, how scared and tentative the alien was to actually go after it, or if they were going to keep their eye on you. tons of back and forth between directors, animators, engineers, hand in glove, just continuing to iterate on it until this vertical slice was right. And it worked. And of course, we don't know it works until you put somebody in the headset and keep testing them on it. And that's another part of the process I, as a film animator, not used to. Like, we're focus grouping, once a month, and getting groups of people in and trying it out. And they're telling us, like, I didn't understand how to do that, or it wasn't clear that this character was feeling that, or I didn't feel like I was doing anything important, or whatever that feedback is. You just grab it and use it as much as you can. So, we had a lot of great volunteers that would come in and get their little Amazon gift card or whatever they get for participating. I don't remember, but it was fun because we just got to watch people. We got to work on it and watch people interact with it right away in a crude version. But the cool part for me is when we got to go in and do the animation. So, like I said, with Crow the Legend, that was as close to a narrative story as Baobab has done, like a straight narrative story. Yes, you participated as the spirit of the seasons, and you felt consequential, but you really weren't, as bad as that sounds. It was mostly just this beautiful theatrical production that you can see. I'm showing you footage from the actual shot theatrical version of it that we did afterwards. So that allowed us to do that. With Bonfire, we didn't, the next production, we didn't have that ability to make it a linear theatrical thing because it wasn't really very linear. It was somewhat linear, but there was a lot of deviations in the middle. And so it just wasn't, it was just a VR experience. But animating it involved a lot of different pieces, though. Like I said, this was the show that we really created our language. We really created our system of tearing things apart and knowing how to create the right modular pieces to be able to stitch back together in almost limitless ways. And also have what you're watching here is just like an entertaining, narrative scene. But just a quick overview of that, some of the obvious things, you have behavior clips and locomotion clips that you're creating. You create libraries of those get stitched together. That's the stuff we did in the vertical slice mostly. So we already, had the logic system built for that. And we built what was called the pork bun brain, that had different if-thens kind of thing. The tree was beautiful to look at, the node tree. And I kind of understood it by the end of it, but really not. So that's that whole library. But then there's kind of these specialty antics that happen at kind of more, they're like the rewards you get if certain conditions are met. One of them was, playing a real game of fetch with pork bun at the end. And that's fun because we're still animators and we still plan these out and then do little thumbnails of them and show them to the director. And the director goes, I like that one, and that one. Then we do 3D versions of them and get them into the engine, and they get kind of stitched on to the end of certain playful, more game-like moments. But there's also just the straight up narrative animation. There are what I think could be considered like cutscenes, but they're stitched right into the narrative flow. They're just kind of in-action scenes that for that brief time, you don't necessarily have a ton of interaction, but hopefully you don't notice because you're thoroughly entertained by the cuteness that's in front of you, we hope. So those pieces, there's all sorts of pieces like that as our job to organize and create and bring a crew together to create. And I think we only had like 5 animators on this team, so it was a lot of work. But we ended up, very, very, very proud of it. You're in the middle of it and you're freaking out because you don't know if it's going to work. And then you get to the end of it and it finally, the genius engineers have just like stitched it together to make it work the way you had hoped that it would. Now, Baba Yaga was, like I said, the culmination of everything we had been working on, and especially the culmination of Crow the Legend and Bonfire. It has the the beautiful theatrical narrative, immersive theatrical narrative of Crow the Legend. And it has the interactive structure that we kind of developed in Bonfire and puts them together in a way that is still narrative but you are important to it in a subtle way, not as subtle as Crow, but you know, it's not as overt as gamifying, but it's not as passive as you being an invisible ghost. You, once again, are a character. You are Sasha, Magda's sister. So we had to develop who the character was first. Empathy for Magda is first and foremost, above anything else, above any technology working, whatever. If you don't care about this little 10-year-old girl and her desire to save her village, then you know, there's no point. So we had to find who she was, and we had to do a bunch of little tests and, you know, get her body language and also kind of start developing the animation style itself. And we looked at some of our favorite movies and kept coming back to like Kubo and the Two Strings and Coraline and all these great Leica stop motion things, and decided, you know what? Your want is to take the game engine technology and say, at this time, I think we were at 72 frames a second, you know, like, yeah, let's have the highest fidelity movement we can. And we tried it and it just looks mushy and weird. So we went the opposite way and said, what if we animate at what animators love, which is 12 frames a second? Like, so you get this texture. And sometimes we'd go on like, you know, that's considered going on 2s. Sometimes we go on 4s and leave nice big chunky gaps if it was slow movement to get like this really textural movement. So that what you're watching here, I don't know how it's, you know, going over the Zoom feed, but it is definitely on 2s and 4s. And it gets you that tactile stop motion-y feel. So we continued to do a bunch of tests just to kind of find who she was in different emotional states, and did the director respond, and, you know, how was the eye contact working and all that kind of stuff. But we did have to get this concept in engine because, as you can imagine, the refresh rate of the headset, specifically the Quest that we were developing for at the time, is pretty high fidelity. So if a character is only moving at 12 frames a second unstepped, like stepping between those frames, not interpolated at all, is that going to be stroby and painful? And we had to come up with ways of like, okay, well, when the character's really close, we're going to increase the frame rate, possibly even go down to 24 frames a second. We were never going to exceed 24 frames a second, but we could go as low as 6 frames a second at times if it worked, you know. But some of the so when she's moving fast, when she's close to you, you want to increase the fidelity of the frame range. When it's at a medium distance and the movement is subtle, we learned we could take away a lot. And that was really fun to discover, because the director at the beginning of the production was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, come on, we've got this fidelity, we should use it. And so we A/B'd the same animation. And you know, I swear to you, we didn't make like the fully interpolated one crappy on purpose. Like, we did them to the best of our ability. And sure enough, he was like, yep, the 12 frames per second looks way better. And he's like, why is that? And we're like, it just does. It's just textural and cool. So that was nice to be able to do. So, you know, we had other characters in this. We had Baba Yaga, the villain. We had her house. You know, we had, you know, the mother character. And so we played just like normal animators do. And we did tons of funny video reference and did some thumbnail stuff, you know, just to get an idea. And that's really quick, that you can put up in front of a director and they can be like, yeah, that works. And let's try it. Let's get it into Maya. Let's put it on stage and see what it looks like. So, you know, like, those tests, those simple little thumbnail tests, helped us find moments like this. You know, when Magda first, this is just a play blast from Maya, but when Magda first discovers Baba Yaga's giant seashell house, you know, and how it might come out of the ground, and then the graphics guys working on the effects could be like, oh yeah, and then it starts throwing rocks and dust is coming out and the lighting could start blinding you. And it was just really fun to be able to do that kind of stuff first with something about Baba Yaga's house. You know, the villain herself, the director wanted to have, you know, she kind of had like a split personality where she was all creaky and stiff and in a certain mode. And then, but when she decided to be scary and intimidating, you know, she could suddenly move as, you know, as fast as a snake. So we, you know, found ways to make her fly and ride on her mortar, and in the way she uses the pestle as sort of her wizard staff, you know, and you know, finding ways that she rides on the mortar that's different when she's in different moods. Like it's more like a skateboard sometimes. It's more like a skateboard when she's being snarky, but it's more like she moves more like a jellyfish when she's being mean and intimidating. Her cape, you know, we built in a thing to the rig that when the meaner she gets, the amplitude and frequency of her cape wind, her magic wind through her cape gets higher. Just fun stuff like that to start to discover, because you're sitting there right next to her. So all of these subtleties become noticeable. And then our main character, Magda, who just really had to be cute. She had to be brave, but still scared. She had to be, you know, your younger sibling. So she knew she was supposed to defer to you, but didn't want to. So, but kept asking for your help. All of these things sort of, you know, we had to hang on to that the entire time. Hang on, there we go. But all of that fun, you know, needed to kind of still be cut up into pieces and reassembled into our interactive narrative design framework. So a lot of things had to be thought of, that certain animations hooked up to other certain animations. Some things might have been layers that blended things together. Or, you know, there were certain like lighting cues that maybe it went black for a second, came back on, that could cover things up, but allowing you to be able to bounce around in this interactive design. And this is an example actually of something I gave to the composer who scored the piece, just so they knew, you know, where the music was going to lay. But even something as simple as Magda talking to her mother, the chieftain, while she was dying in bed, you know, as it goes through these little color things, are examples of moments where things could change, or you could omit a part and stitch something together, or it skips a part and goes to something else. And some of those parts are continuous and some of them are waiting for interactions, but it all had to kind of stitch together in this giant, like, I think it's like a 2,500 frame sequence that I ended up having to animate by myself. It's a lot of late nights. So that's the extra challenge, was that we had to think, we couldn't just freely go crazy. Everything had to be planned, from storyboards through animation, through interactivity. It all had to kind of like be working in parallel, pretty much. And lighting and effects, this is the theatrical version, but the theatrical version ended up really informing the in-engine stuff, where Bonfire was strictly in-engine. So, I mean, I think we all know the limitations of real-time rendering. It's getting better and better by the year, by the month. And so this was kind of, we adopted sort of a flatter, more graphic style with this. And I still think it worked because it kept your eye focused where it needed to be focused. With Baba, we kind of split the difference. I think a lot of the stuff was not direct lighting, which saved on a lot of memory usage, so that we could use a lot of really beautifully painted set pieces in conjunction with, you can see like the fire down at the bottom was actually animated 2D sprites. And we did that, as were the candle wicks. So a lot of the effects that were built into it were animated 2D effects on sprites, which again, saved a ton of you know, lighting memory and stuff. But it still came, but we were able to use blend of the two to get that same kind of storybook feel that we wanted to. It's just fun to always end up seeing it lit in the end. In any project you're in, it's really fun. One extra little cool bonus piece of Baba was that the prologue and the epilogue, if you maybe you've seen it already, is like a pop-up storybook feel, or sort of like we used to like to think of it as like a Renaissance theater troupe that had like big set pieces that they would just lift up and hold in and pull out by hand. So the art director and he and I just did this together, just ourselves. We had the concept art that he came up with, and we just sat and talked, and we went, okay, we just colored over it and made what pieces should be what. And I gave an example how I'd like it to move, and he cut it up and put it in. And this was actually animated in Unity, which is, if you've ever used Unity for animation, is not fun. but it just had to be done because we couldn't figure out a way efficiently enough in the time that we had and the budget we had to port it over from Maya. And we would have had to build double the assets and things like that. So we just built the assets. The art director literally built the assets himself. This was no engineer, other than our graphics guy at the end touched this. And so it was a fun little project. And you get to do that in small little studios, and of course, throughout all of this, you've got to have people in headset reviewing this. You've got to keep testing and find out, like, this scene is just going wrong. It's not working. People aren't picking up that thing, or they're not deciding they want to be involved, or they're not, they don't feel like they know who they are, or whatever. You need constant feedback. And like we would do at least once every 2 months over the course of the production, have a big, we'd call them screenings, but they were just really user tests, to come in and test it and, fill out surveys and go through interviews and stuff like that. And that's, there are focus groups in movie making, but this is, different. And then there's release day, which is also different because it's on, a store, instead of in a movie theater. But if you guys are curious about any of these things, these are great. All of these productions are really great, and they're all available on, Oculus, and I think the Vive store, and I know PlayStation as well. And so, I have nothing to gain by anymore by you guys looking at them, other than I'm proud of them. And I think you guys will have fun seeing what we were trying to do. And I am hopeful that, I'm just really hopeful that the industry or the market sort of starts to catch up to what these few companies like Baobab were trying to pioneer. And this becomes like a real entertainment medium in the future. But until then, we'll keep making some movies. So, and really that's it. I think I'll just stop there because I want to be able to open it up for any questions anybody has, or